You know, as I get closer to the 40-year-old mark, I kind of think back 20 years ago. What would I say to my 19-year-old self? What would I say to my 20-year-old self? What would I say to my 25-year-old self? And, I know that God led me into the ministry, and God has provided for me and taken care of me, and I've had some low days, but I've had some really good days too. And God has protected me and provided for me, and I just thank God for it. I think you ought to follow God's will with your life, no doubt. But if I was not called to ministry and I was just, a guy in the church who was called to just serve the Lord in my local church, what would I say to myself? And the thing that keeps coming up in my mind over and over and over and over again is if I would go back and talk to my 20-year-old self, I would tell myself to start a business and work my own business. Now, here's the thing. We have this economy today is so weird in that we have inflation. And inflation is almost at 10%. It is out of control. The price of everything is going up. The cost of living is going up, and the wages are stagnant, meaning that, you guys can go get a job right now if you want to for $25 an hour, but you're still not going to get ahead. You're not going to get ahead at a $25 an hour job right now, because eventually when the cost of living goes up and up and up and up, $25 is going to end up, being the equivalent of $15. And so, if things keep going the way they are, there's going to be $50 an hour entry-level jobs. And next thing you know, we're Zimbabwe. And it's crazy how this all works. And even if you do have a good job that pays you $25 an hour, if you need extra money, you can go work overtime. But overtime is taxed so insanely heavy, it's almost not even worth it. And so what I'm telling young men today to do, the answer to all this, is that you need to start your own business. You really do. You need to start your own business and learn what a business is, learn how to profit in a business, and take on the risk of starting your own business. And let me make this post to you. I posted this on Twitter and posted it on Facebook and whatever, and I want to share it with you. Hourly wage jobs are paying less and less due to inflation and the weakness of the economy. What's the way out of this trap? Encourage young men to start their own business. If you work a job, the upside of pay is limited to overtime, which is heavily taxed. And if you own a business, the upside of pay is unlimited and taxed far less. So, for example, if you make a job, your hourly wage ends up being like $50,000 a year, but you take on some overtime and you add another $15,000 to that with just an overtime pay, so your pay is like $65,000 a year. That overtime pay is going to be taxed significantly higher. So if you're working $25 an hour and you get taxed on that, it could be something, and I'm just throwing a number out there, it could be something like the equivalent of $13 an hour. And that's unacceptable. That's not worth your effort and wearing yourself out with all that. But if you have a business, okay, if you have a business, then the upside of pay, meaning that, if you hit a strong lick and get a good business deal and, making $50,000 and you hit a $15,000 business deal on top of that, it's going to be taxed significantly less because you can write it off as a business expense and things like that. There's just a lot of tax things that you can do there that you get to keep more of your money if you own a business. Now, this is advice that I'm giving a lot of young guys, and I notice as I tell them this, look, go start your own business, and I'm not saying quit your job right now, but I'm just saying, look, just go start your business and let that be what provides for your family. A lot of guys, man, they start to faint and they just, they just can't imagine the idea of that. And here's why. Because you feel secure in your hourly wage. You feel secure in that job. And it was one of the guys on Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, and he's a guy that I think he's a scoundrel, but as a businessman, he's a pretty smart guy. Kevin O'Leary said this. He said, a salary is the drug they give you to give up on your dreams. A salary is the drug that they give you to give up on your dreams. And I think he's right. I think it makes you feel comfortable, that hourly wage. It makes you feel like, predictable, like I can expect this amount of income. And yeah, sure, there's a structure of stability that gives you, but it limits the ceiling in which you can make money. So some of you right now, you're working a job and you're making $50,000 a year, and you feel safe in that. But the truth is that you ought to desire to make, and if you had your own business, that $50,000 a year could become $150,000 a year with the same amount of work. It could. Why would you rob yourself of that? Now, here's the deal with that. You have to take on a risk, and young men today are such wimps. They're scared of a risk. They say, "Oh, I want to feel safe. I don't want to go out there and do anything that scares me." Well, that's what being a man is. Every example in the Bible I see of young men stepping up to the plate and going at it and saying, "I'm going to take a chance with this, and I'm going to just if I lose everything, I'm just going to let it be that way." So help me God. Listen, you need to start a business. I believe every young man should start a business, even if it's not a big business, even if you don't go full time, just something on the side that provides you a good $15,000 a year. I think you ought to do it. And let me give you some biblical reasons why. Number one, you ought to be able to, as a Christian man, you ought to seek to accept the responsibility of money so that you can use that money for the glory of God. I'm going to go preach a missions conference in Michigan, and probably tomorrow I'll be leaving for that, and I'll be preaching there through Sunday. And, the problem that I have, and this problem I see in churches, is that there's no money for missions. There's no money for missions. And if a guy makes, $350,000 a year, he's the richest man of the church, and especially in independent Baptist churches. And it shouldn't be that way. I mean, we should have businessmen everywhere in our churches, but we don't. And the reason we don't is because everybody's in there, nobody started their own business. Everybody's working these hourly wage jobs. So you ought to desire to have money and use it for God's glory. You ought to desire that and want that so that you can help missionaries, so you can pay for missions projects, so that you can, provide for an evangelist as he comes through, or just use money to be a blessing. And that's why you should want to do it. Number two, you ought to desire to be successful in business and use money not only for the glory of God, but just for the provision of your own family. You ought to want to be able to buy your wife a decent car. You ought to be able to go take your family on a vacation. And as time goes on, that margin of extra money that you can use to do fun things with your wife and kids is going to be less and less and less as inflation goes forward, and as you sit there with your hourly wage job. So you ought to desire to use money for the glory of God, but also to take care of your own family. You are a provider. You are the man of the family. You should provide for your family and protect your family. And I think those go hand in hand. A man who is a fierce protector of his family is also a fierce provider of his family and for his family. You ought to desire that. I'm thankful that I'm able to provide for my family. And, listen, I'm of the persuasion that a woman ought to stay home. That'll get me in trouble today. I know that get me in trouble. But I'm of the persuasion that a woman ought to stay home. And the reason a lot of women today are not staying home and working, and just being a housewife, taking care of the wife and kids at home, is because the average man today, partly, is because the average man today can't provide. She's got to go to work too. And, oh, boy, I got myself in trouble with that. Oh, boy. That's all right. That's all right. The Lord knows. Guys, I'm going to tell you, you ought to want to use money for God's glory. And you ought to ask God to teach you money. You ought to ask God to show me, Lord, how I can use this for God's glory. And Lord, if you give me this, I'll use it for God's glory. I got a lot of mission trips. I need help with missions trips. I need help. I need folks to come on missions trips with me. I need folks to go on missions trips for me. I really do. But, Dominican Republic has a need, and Dominican Republic airfare is $600. $600. And when I tell people that, hey, airfare is $600, most men faint. And I think I read the other day somewhere online that they say that the average American household doesn't have $500 on hand. Why? Why is that? It's because these companies are paying you an hourly wage, and it's being eaten up by inflation. And the cost of living is going up, and your wages are stagnant, and the margin of expendable money is getting less and less and less and less and less. The only answer to this is to start a business. You need to start a business. And guys, there's a lot of ways you can do that. I might be able to help you with some ideas, but it's going to take work. It's going to take risk, but you get all the upside of it, all the upside. And you could be able to use it for God's glory, be able to bless missionaries, be able to help missions projects, be able to take care of your own family. There is no downside to this. Sure, you might have a rough year starting off one or two, and you may take a few licks along the way, but that is how it works. You're taking risk working a job anyway. Why not take the same risk and own your own business? This is my thoughts for today. A lot of Bible I could throw in there too as well, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And guys, we love you, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.